Welcome to Blender Frenzy. I am Justin back with you here, and yes, this is my real hair color. You can see it is white. It's turning white very rapidly, actually, and you can see this a lot better. This actually has been going on, but you can see this a lot better with my new webcam that I got. So it's a little bit more clear. It accentuates all my aging features. So that's what you have today. Today we're going to be talking about procedural text reveal. It's kind of in the same line of the dynamic titles, the lower thirds, professional, two-dimensional titles for your videos and all that stuff. But this is what I mean by procedural, so let's just take a look. So it's kind of hard to describe. I say procedural, I mean dynamic, automatic, changeable. It adapts to your text, and that's what I mean by that. So hi. Any length of text here, that's what happens like this. It's hard to find a word that actually accurately describes it. I say procedural because it is doing procedural calculations in order to make this box, and this is what it's happening. So this box, the text is sliding behind it and then coming back out. Then with whatever we put here, whatever text here, it automatically resizes. And that's the same thing for something like this, where it slides in, and if we select this, Geo Nodes, the bounding box resizes with the text, and the text slides out just enough for a little gap, and that gap is always the same. So to demonstrate the problem, here is some just regular text with a plane, and it's the same thing. So the text is just sliding behind that plane. And but this time, if I actually come in here and just put text with more words, you can see obviously the plane doesn't automatically resize with that. But if we also have our fly-in text here, you can see same thing. If I rename this to with more words, then of course the bounding box doesn't match, and the text itself doesn't fly in longer or shorter depending on the words, the length of the words. It is just a set. These keyframes are a set distance. So from here to here, that's all the distance. So even if we did come in here and take these and resize them to fit like this, then the text wouldn't slide out far enough. And we'd have to replace these keyframes. So I'd have to come in here, grab this, and replace keyframes, and then duplicate this and put that here. And then it would, just like that. But this is too much work if someone just wanted to download it, didn't know much about Blender, and wanted to use this for their video and just type their own text here. So that's where the power of the procedural stuff comes in here, like this. Text flying in and flying out, either from the side or, again, from the bottom up, or whichever direction actually you want it to go. So that is what we're going to create today, and I'm going to show you a screenshot of it before, so you can take a screenshot, see what we're going to do. So this is the basics. This is kind of the bare bones minimum of starting to get something that is procedural with text effects that you can do and use them as a template in order to either sell them or have them for a download so that people can use them straight out of the box without much work. So let's open up a new instance of Blender. I'm going to delete everything 7 into top mode, and that's 7 on the numpad, by the way. Shift A to add in a mesh, and then I'm going to say single vert because we're going to replace this anyway, so might as well just replace a single vert with geometry nodes. So let's T to close that. Let's bring out a geometry nodes section here. New for geometry nodes, select everything. Let's press home first and then scale these out. Actually, I should have scaled them out first, so scale them out like that, and then I'm going to disconnect this one and then add in a string to curves. Okay. And this is what's going to be plugged into our group output, and then you can see it up here. Of course, we don't have a string yet, so we can type in here, this is a string, and now you can see the string. So basically, you have your single vert, it's coming in here, in the group input, it gets disconnected, and it gets replaced with a string that we type in here, and then it's output here. This is just a curve, so we need to fill that in with some geometry. So let's add in a fill curve right there. Boom. All right, we've got that. And to make this a little easier to change our text, I'm going to bring this string into this input. But before I do that, let's go to, just to show you what's happening, let's go to our modifiers. Geometry Nodes is a modifier, just like any of these other modifiers here. You can see right there, we can enable and disable it just the same way. But you can see I don't really have anything over here. But if I take this string and I plug it into this socket right here, you can see now I have a string. And you know, we can also change this text here. If we come to our group tab here, we can double click here, and we'll just call this text. And now whatever I place in here, Geo Nodes, it's just easier that way than finding the node each time to fill it in. Okay, so let's move on. Where all the magic is going to happen in this is with our next node, and that is a bounding box node. And if you put that in straight away like that, you see a bounding box over each letter, which is not what we want. So to change that, that's simple. Right before the bounding box, we want to put in a realize instances node, and now we have the bounding box over the whole thing. I don't know why that works. That's just the way it works. Okay, so then we can take from our realize instances another branch and then choose join geometry and plug that one in instead. And then we can add our bounding box in. Now both of them are in the same space. They're taking up the exact same plane, so we can't see the text. But if we add in a couple of transform geometry, so I'm put one here, and I'm going to just duplicate this and put one here. So then we can move these kind of separately from each other. So I'm just going to move the text up a little bit right there. Okay, so now we have both of them. And this is actually it. If that's all you need, of course we don't have any materials on it yet, but it works. So Geometry Nodes rocks. Ta-da! And then of course we can animate our text going up and down right behind that. And again, they're still taking up the same space, so we can bring that box up a little bit on the Z here, like that. And then as long as we're in an orthographic mode, when we bring this back down to 0, that should be completely hidden. We shouldn't be able to see that. Now this is just top orthographic mode. If you're using a camera, you have to actually change the camera to orthographic mode, which we can do at the end. But if you're just using text and you're animating it to go up and down like this, then you really don't need to do a whole lot, because we can add in here we have 1 meter. I guess it's in meters, but I'll do insert single keyframe here. And pull the timeline up. Let's see here. And something I did notice, there's a bit of a bug. See, we can't see this keyframe now. But if I mute this and unmute this, you can see, now we can see the keyframe. So something has to change here to kind of wake Blender up and say, hey, we've added a keyframe. So hopefully that does it, and I don't have to keep doing that. But let's put this keyframe at, scroll in and put it at 25, and then the first one actually I want to be 0, and that I want to be that at 10. Okay, good. Now we can see both of them. Perfect. Okay, so now we have this, and then we can duplicate those, and I will flip it, scale -1. And for this to flip it right, you have to have the timeline cursor over one of the keyframes, and it acts as a pivot point. And then we can end it, let's see, we'll just end it at 80. Okay, so then we've got this loop going where the text comes up and then goes back down and is hidden. So that's pretty straightforward, and that is, again, this is pretty much done if this is the type of template you want to make. So I can just type in my text here. Now if you want to have something that's more centered, let's go ahead and add in a camera. So I'm still in edit mode. Let's go camera. Let's see, we're going to bring this camera up on the Z. Go into, this is perspective mode, so I'm going to go to my camera settings with my camera selected, and perspective, I'm going to change that to orthographic, and now we can start to change our orthographic scale, so just like that. And I can also shift X and Y right here, so to make this more centered. So you can see this is centered now, but if I change the text, so if I select vert, let's change this to text because it's not a vert anymore. And go to modifiers, and then I change this to your custom text. It's not centered. So that's because our string to curves has some options here, and right now it's left aligned. So we just change that to center, and then of course come back to our camera to adjust those settings here. Let's see, right in the center, kind of like that. And now coming back here, we can type in something else. Geo. There we go. Nodes. And now whatever they type here, then it will automatically resize and all of that good stuff. Oh, we might want to take the camera up just a little bit too, because that's not quite centered. If you had text that you wanted to come up into the center, then it would probably look something like this. Okay, so this is all well and good, but let's do the slide in, or the fly in from the side here. So I'm going to duplicate this, and we will hide our text fly up, and I'll just rename this to fly up, and this will be text fly. We can say in or left, I guess that would make more sense. And so for this, just clear these keyframes here. And I'm going to keep that at 1 just so that we can see the text for now. But we want to slide the text this way. The problem though is if I right now add in keyframes like we did before. So here on 0 we do insert single keyframe, and then we gotta mute and unmute. There we go to see our keyframe, and then 25. This one will be here. We'll put a little gap between this, and that is good. So 2.9, insert single keyframe there. Okay, so this is good. I'm not going to duplicate these now because we're going to need to change them. If I ever change the text, this is not completely procedural. Even though the bounding box is going to change, Blender Frenzy, you can see that the keyframes are a specific distance. It's always from 0 to 2.9. So the bounding box is right, but the text doesn't go far enough out. So we need to make that procedural too, and there is a really easy way to do that using the min and maximum values from the bounding box. Essentially what we want to do is get the length of the x. So that's where this min and max come from. So if I hover over here, the maximum value on the x, you have the x, y, and z, 3.06 on the x, 0.68 on the y, and of course 0 on the z because it is flat. It is completely two-dimensional, so there is no thickness. So the maximum value is in reference to the center world origin, which is right here, where the white and red 3D cursor is, and that is right here, very center. This is 0, 0, 0 world origin, and anything to the right of that is positive, anything to the left of that is negative on the x. So again, the maximum on the x is 3.06, which is 3.06 to the right of the world origin, and the minimum is going to be the other way. It's negative 2.98 to the left of the world origin. To get the distance, or the length from here to here, is a very simple calculation, and it is the maximum. If we pull that out and let go, type in subtract minus the minimum, and then that is your length on all three. It doesn't actually show it here, but it's on all three, x, y, and z. So we can plug that into our translation. Boom. So it's placing it in the upper right corner because it's taking into consideration the height as well. So it's taking the length and the height and saying, okay, this is where we need to be. But I don't want it to take consideration of the height. So to change that, let's pull these out here so we can have a little bit more room. Let's duplicate this calculation, change it to multiply, and now nothing is happening. You can see it's back down here. And that's because we're multiplying all of these values by 0, which means that nothing is going to happen. It's going to be 0, 0, 0 for the translation. So I only want the text to slide on the x, so that's this first one here. I'm going to type in 1. That doesn't mean the text is going to slide 1 meter or 1 unit. If you think about these as percentages, so 0 is 0% and 1 is 100%. And that's where the procedural aspect and the power of this comes in. So at 100% or at 1, the text is at the full length of the bounding box. It's actually touching it. As you can see, there's no gap here. And this is already going to work straight away with whatever we put in here. So let's just do Blender. And then even though this is shorter, it actually does the same thing. So let's animate this again, but before we do, let's pull this vector. Instead of animating it here, let's take this, pull this out into another socket here in the group input, and we can add a keyframe here. So let's go to 10 again. We want this to be 0 on 10, and then on 25, we want this to be 1. Like that. Duplicate these, flip it by S -1 right at 60. So it comes in, and then it goes back in. Put your own text here. Ta-da! And again, because we are actually keyframing something that is 0 to 1, or percentage 0% to 100%, 100% is always going to change. That's the procedure aspect of it. That's the dynamic. So 100% of put your own text here is different than 100% of Geo Nodes. 100% here is a bit smaller, which means we never have to change our keyframes because it's always between 0% and 100%. But I don't like this touching right up against the bounding box. I like to have a little gap, and we can actually add in one more calculation node here to do just that. So right here we want to say add, and we'll bring this here into another input as well. And then this one, we can add in a little bit of a gap. So we can do like 0.3 if we want. And what this is going to do, if you place it in between the subtract and the multiply here, then it should have your desired effect. If you put the add after the multiply, it won't work as you would probably expect it to work. So here, 0% is still 0. You still see the text all the way underneath. But 100% is actually our new modified with the gap. And again, we didn't change that keyframe, which means this is completely procedural, dynamic. I can actually change this on the fly. So I can make that gap bigger when it comes out, or smaller. And this gap is going to be the same. So if I put 0.3 here, it's going to always be 0.3, no matter what text goes here again. So it's going to be 0.3 gap between the bounding box and the text. Now let's clean this up here. So we've got our text. This is going to be our text move or text animation. We'll just say text move. And then this one is going to be our text offset. And since this is the animation, and if you don't want people to be overwhelmed by the animation, if they don't know much about it and they don't want to tweak that at all, then you can actually come down here with our text move selected. We can say hide in modifier, and it'll just hide that there so that they don't need to see this. They don't need to see this. If they just download the template, they can see, oh, hey, I have text, and then I have some text offset. What's up? Of course, this actually is also, since it's not going up into the center, we don't need this center aligned. We actually need this aligned a little bit differently. So let's go and see what that is. Now, intuitively, you would think that since we want to fly in from the left, we would have this to be left aligned. But you actually have a problem, or you run into a problem with that. Okay, so let's adjust the camera to compensate here. So let's say right now it's looking like this. So we want it to fly in from the side like this. Okay, that looks all right. But what happens then if we change our text to something different? Okay, well, this ends up changing the point where it comes out. And that's because since it's left aligned, that means it's going to be, our origin point over here is going to be to the left of the text. So it's going to start off there, and any changes that are made, any scaling is going to scale from this point. So it scales it out, which means that it scales it more into the middle. But then if I just add one word, okay, then that changes here and it scales it all the way over here, which is completely out of frame. So this means we need to change the anchor point to right aligned, and then that way when it scales it, so you can see the center point is here. And now if hi, my name is Justin, the anchor point stays here, and then it's scaled out this way. So if it's left aligned in the camera view, then it will have to be right aligned in our geometry nodes. So that's just a little tidbit that you're going to have to remember. And then we can change in our camera. We can do orthographic scale down like that. And now, whatever text we put here, I don't know. It's always going to come in from the same place. Okay, so let's get some textures on this. Let's go to the material preview mode here first, and then I overlays and disable those here so we can see it a little bit better. I'm also going to go to the render properties, scroll all the way down to color management, change filmic to standard. So the standard RGB colors, and let's add some material. So the first thing I'm going to do is add in a set material right here, duplicate that down, and now we need to actually make some materials. So let's come to our material tab. There's a default material I'm going to choose from the drop down, and we'll change this to text. I'm going to change principled to emission, and we can leave that white, and then I'm going to add in another one, new, and this is going to be hold out, and I'm going to change principled to the holdout shader. Okay, then I'm going to add in another one, and then I'm going to choose text again, and I'm going to click the number here to make its own copy, change this to black, and then just change the color here to black. And that's so we can change it here and we can see it if we want to. So black, here's the bounding box, but then we can just change it to holdout when we want to see it disappear. All right, so that's what that looks like, and we can say something else. Boom, in and out. And then, of course, we didn't do all of this with our fly up text, so I'm just going to take this and duplicate that. This is going to be fly up to, hide that one, and instead of moving the camera this time, I'm just gonna grab and move this where I think this should be, and we're going to change the string to curves to center. Yeah, where I think that the center might be. I'm just eyeballing it here. Don't need to be too accurate right now, just for demonstration. And then, of course, these keyframes here, I'm just going to take these two and delete those. So it's going to be on 25 and on 60. That was with our text move, which we can't see right now, so I'm going to unhide that. And actually, you know what? It's on the X, so I'm just going to clear keyframes because we're going to add these on the Y. So 0 on the Y, 25. If I put 1 here, and then we can change our 0.3 to 0 on the X and put it down here, 0.3. So it's going 0.3 up as our text offset. Add any keyframe there, and then duplicate these like before. Scale X -1, and now we have our centered text. This text is centered. Perfect. Okay, this is all being done in the material preview mode, but if you actually have scene lights and scene world on, it's not going to have the desired effect here. You can see. Oh, and for some reason I changed that. There we go. You can actually see our holdout texture. So we have to go to the rendered mode. And by the way, all of this is being done in Eevee, so we're in Eevee. So let's go to our render properties, and then we want to go down to film and then click transparent. And this is where the power comes in, where its text is coming up out of nowhere and then it's going back in to nowhere. So hiding that, and let's do this. So this is coming in from the side. And let's see, we want to change, is that right? Is that, because, okay, so for some reason, this is center. Oh, I know why. Because this is the same instance. So whatever I change here, it's actually going to change in fly up text too. So what we have to do is come over to geometries, make sure we select our text fly left, and then click this number again to make this its own instance, or not an instance, but its own thing. And then I'll say geo fly left. And then we can change this to the left aligned, actually the right aligned, remember, because it's opposite. So there we go. Now it's coming in where it should be coming in from. And then if we go back here, then this text is still centered up here, and it doesn't inherit what we have from that. We got to select it though so we can see it. And then we can type geo fly up 2. There we go. And this one is still centered. So now we can see if we have this one selected, it corresponds with the proper geometry nodes. So there you go. Then all you need to do is render this out as an image sequence, or you can use this just as a scene and bring that scene into the video sequence editor to overlay and use that as an overlay, and that would be pretty dynamic. But this is how you could achieve something like this. This is the building blocks of having the, making your own titles, making your own lower thirds, making a template for others so that you can start to build onto this. And whatever cool effect you make that someone may like, they're like, oh, I like that text effect. I want to use that text effect with my own text. And then they just go to wherever your download is, they download your template, and then they say, my brand is awesome. And then they put their own brand here, and that is how it's done. So this is the simplest version that I could make that would demonstrate the power of procedural text like this in geometry nodes. So I'm going to take this building block, and then in the next few videos I'm going to use it to start building on and creating a more fleshed out template. So we have different options over here where people can customize it to their own colors, making it more procedural, more dynamic, so that they don't have to mess around with the animation at all, but they can just plug in their own brand, and with very little work on their part, just plug and play. So if that's something that you're interested in, stay tuned and you'll see me in the next one. You can find this video and a whole lot more by going to my new website, blenderfrenzy.com, where you can access lots of free and members-only content, including extra tutorials, downloads, assets, blend files, Q&A live streams, and much more. Signing up helps support me, which in turn gives you more Blender content, so head on over to blenderfrenzy.com and become a member today.